Since the dawn of the GAA in 1884, the telling of its stories have been just as important as the sports. Through the years, heroes and matches have been immortalised, inspiring generation after generation. But some of its most important stories have also gotten lost or turned into legend. And in this series, we will explore some of the GAA's most fascinating forgotten tales, separating rumour from reality and myth from the truth that is often more amazing than the fiction. I'm Michael Foley.
And I'm Ciaran O'Hara.
So join us for Over the Bar, exploring the histories of the GAA.
G.E. Gael, welcome to the latest edition of Over the Bar, the Gaelic Games History Podcast. And we've got a special one today. Mick, we're celebrating an anniversary of sorts, but we are also answering the question of who had the longest run to win an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like that long ago, but my God, it was 20 years ago. I can't believe it was 20 years ago. Oh, stop. This was this is kind of the heyday of an era in so many ways, this particular year, 2005. I mean, quite apart from producing the team that, had to go the furthest and the longest to win an All-Ireland, which, by the way, in case if there's anybody who hasn't worked it out, 05 is Tyrone. Apart from that, you were living through this era where Croke Park was just coming into its own as well. You had huge crowds for these games. Tyrone and Dublin, first day out in the All-Ireland quarter-final, 78,000. Ulster final, first day out, over 60,000. The place was buzzing. Football, in my memory anyway, and I don't think I'm sugarcoating it too much, was in a pretty good place. It was in an evolving place, but it was in quite a nice space. There was a lot of kind of, surprise results, different things would happen. When we're talking about 05, and we will come back to this at the end, but I would say now, I said it at the time, I remember, and I would definitely say it now, it's still, pound for pound, the greatest All-Ireland that was ever won.
And what better way for us to discuss it than to have one of the protagonists of that Tyrone team with us. Former colleague of mine at 3 broadcasters now, Peter Canavan.
Just 3?
Just 3. Yeah, we'll see if we can add another couple before all time passes. We could have done a live special for this. We probably should have gone up to Canavan's hotel to do a live in-person video episode. We don't do video episodes, Mick, but I can tell you that if we'd gone that far to what we used to know as Kelly's Inn,
the nerve centre,
we wouldn't need to dress a set, because the bar in Canavan's, I can tell you, has enough memorabilia to pass off any day. So, Peter, thank you for joining us. Does it feel like 20 years?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Such were the vivid memories of that particular year. It seems like 7 or 8 years ago. And as you said, Michael, a lot of really good football matches, not just the final, but on our way to that. And we could have been nipped different times. We were nipped once along that route before we got there. But yeah, the standard of football was really good and enjoyable to play in. And some brilliant memories.
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
You'd had a tough year the year before. Well, the entire group had a tough year for a variety of reasons. But for you personally, injury had hampered you after the initial All-Ireland win. So 2004 had been a terrible year for you injury-wise. And then there's a tumult in the group because of the tragedy that strikes Cormac McAnellen as well. So how hard was it for you to decide to come back for 2005?
Well, there was a few, you've said it very well there. It was a difficult time for me personally coming back from the injury, and you were asking yourself, were you up to that level? Were you fit enough to compete? Were you just going to be there for the sake of being there, and I certainly didn't want that. And the team were in a very strange place, from being on the highest of highs after winning an All-Ireland final to the lowest of the low after losing Cormac McAnally. But the one thing, I suppose, that stuck out for me, and it was mentioned by Brian in a speech after, that Cormac didn't want to be remembered as a Tyrone man that won All-Ireland, that won an All-Ireland, and such was his leadership qualities that he would have ensured that wouldn't have been the case. I've absolutely no doubt about that, and I've no doubt that he would have led Tyrone to an All-Ireland title as well. So that was a driving force for me and for every one of the boys, because whilst it was never spoken at training, it was never spoken by Mickey or at any team meetings, it was very much in the forefront of our heads as to why we wanted to win. And the manner in which we did, just it was a remarkable year in that we played so many games. But as I say, it was very enjoyable. The one thing that I suppose stuck out when I look back on it now, people say you played a lot of games and all the rest, but we had a lot of breaks in between those games. There's even a few of the replays. We had a 2-week break from the Armagh game, 2 weeks to prepare for replay, Dublin game. So it wasn't the case as if we played 7 or 8 weeks on the trot or played a lot of games. That wasn't the case. So that made things a wee bit easier. And also, back in that day, that was when, if you won an All-Ireland semi-final, you had 3, sometimes 4 weeks to prepare for an All-Ireland final. So for us that year in 05, we had a 3-week break which was perfect, really, for us after playing so many games, to get reset and to get focused and all the rest. And sure, there's nobody better at getting us primed than Mickey, and that's the way it panned out for the final.
Like you've just mentioned, there's so many fascinating characters that make up why Tyrone were special in that era. Mickey Hart, the manager, you mentioned Brian Dooher, the captain. The thing that struck me coming out of 04 into 05, from the team perspective, and I suppose from your perspective as well, Peter, like, apart from Cormac passing away in 04, like, you know, there was a lot of, like, I mean, you had Enda McGinley was missing with a bad neck injury. I don't think you started the game all year. Like, you had, I mean, just to put into context for people, the injury you had, if I'm right in saying, you had an operation early that year to reattach tendons to the bone of your right ankle. So, like, that is severe. Like, that is severe stuff. You play about 60 odd minutes of championship football all year, having taken a year out to focus on football and so on. Like, it was a very, very difficult year without the incredible impact of a tragedy like Cormac. At the end of the year, you did actually, it was yourself, but this conversation was going around anyway. It was an interview with the Sunday Times where you just spoke about the players and how the season had gone, and speaking about it in quite a detached way, in the sense that Tyrone had lost to Donegal and Ulster that year. It had basically the application, the standard hadn't been good enough. Tyrone lost to Mayo in the All-Ireland quarter-final. Again, were players tuned in the way they should have been? Were we thinking too far ahead? Because Armagh had lost to Fermanagh that same day in an All-Ireland quarter-final. Was everybody looking too far ahead? But those were questions, I think, as well, that were going around, Peter. Were they around the group? Like, we need to get this back to where it was. Like,
absolutely. It was far from perfect for all those reasons that you mentioned. And there were distractions that maybe shouldn't have been there, and players allowed them to become an issue. Maybe Mickey wasn't as ruthless in 04 as he was any other year because of what happened the year before. But I think players got a sense of that themselves, that there wasn't the same application. And look, bear in mind, we were the first Tyrone team ever that had won an All-Ireland title, so we didn't know what to expect. And the year after we won it, and the months after it, was something else. You know, I don't have to tell you two men about what it meant to be taking the Sam Maguire round various homes, families, clubs of Tyrone, and the sheer exhilaration and what that brought to people. So look, that in itself takes a toll on you, and as does a lot of pats on the back. I don't care who you are. It takes away a wee bit from the edge and from the appetite. And after September 23, we certainly got a lot of pats on the back. And then after Cormac passing away, we were getting a lot of sympathy from everywhere in the country. So in terms of headspace, probably not the best place to be preparing or trying to win back your All-Ireland title. And look, I'm not saying that as we turned the corner completely. Like 05, the start of it wasn't straightforward. And so we had a lot of humps and bumps along the way. But again, when you look back on the quality of some of the players that Mickey had to call on, you know, that got us over the line. And there was various games that year where Sean Kavanagh was man of the match and superb. Then it was Stevie O'Neill. Then it was Muggsy. Then it was Brian McGuigan. So look, you had, and I'm talking forwards there. I'm not talking about Conor Gormley or Ryan McMenamin or Philly Jordan, who were all, and I could pick out others who were at the top of their game in 05. And I suppose hence that's why we got back to the top again.
Like, I mean, just to put it into context for people who are listening, before we jump into the championship, Ciaran, like, I mean, the league had gone, Tyrone got to a league semi-final. Peter, you had gone back into the squad and pulled back out again to get your injury sorted, get fitness right and so on and so forth. They lost to Wexford in a league semi-final, which that was a good Wexford team. Like, they were going to make
that was an exceptional Wexford team at the time. Like, that was a Wexford team that came very close to making a major breakthrough in Leinster and certainly were one of the major beneficiaries of the qualifiers at the time.
For sure. And the interesting thing, though, about that moment is that evening when Tyrone lose, the dressing room door is closed and there's a conversation had.
That's an ominous thing, I would think, Peter, in a Tyrone dressing room when the door is closed.
Well, I would love to know what went on because I wasn't there myself.
Well, you're about. I'm going to give this is the polite version anyway. This is what Mickey Hart spoke about after. He said, "Lads, look, they've lost to Wexford league semi-final. They know what's waiting for them on the other side of the door when they come out." He said, "There's two ways we can go here now. We can either fade away as everyone expects, and we go back clapping ourselves on the back for winning an All-Ireland 03, or we can do something different." So it was open to the floor. What needs to be done? So the players initially talked about training. By that stage, Paddy Talley had left the group. The relationship with Mickey Hart had disintegrated at the end of 04. Fergal McCann, God rest him, had come in as team trainer. Tony Donnelly had come in, who had been very close to Mickey for many years. One of his closest friends had come in as a right-hand man. So the management had changed. The players were talking about training. Hart threw that back on them and said, well, are you doing enough? Are you giving all of yourself to what we're doing in training? Hart himself, back to Peter's point there about sort of the ruthlessness, I suppose, I want for a better expression. Hart committed to being more vocal in training, kind of cajoling guys along more. You know, maybe he felt that he could give them a bit more leeway to lead the thing, but maybe this wasn't the time to do that. He needed to take back the reins a bit. The other thing as well is that day against Wexford, they were missing, in no particular order, Enda McGinley, Stephen O'Neill, Brian McGuigan, Brian Dooher, Peter Canavan, and Owen Mulligan. Now, we can flip that one of two ways. Go, well, look, there's guys coming back. But the way they flipped it that evening in the dressing room was the excuses need to stop. We can't go on this way. If guys are missing, well, then we need to go. We need to push on ourselves. The darkest hour comes before the dawn, Mickey tells them before they leave the dressing room. Now, it's still a bit cloudy for a couple of months before the sun comes through. But Peter, you were back in for the Down game. And kind of just, I'm wondering what the vibe was. Can you remember the vibe going into the championship? Where were your headspaces at after all of that?
Well, yeah, and you didn't mention Kevin Hughes. There's no Kevin Hughes.
He's in Australia. Yes, he doesn't come back. Right. Yeah, and Kieran Gurley is injured as well. He's gone, a great defender, a great utility defender, was gone for the year.
And Brian McGuigan had gone to Australia with Kevin Hughes, but he could only put up with him for so long, and thankfully he came home a couple of months earlier. So Brian didn't play in the Down game, but he did come on in the semi-final, I think, against Cavan. We were playing poorly in the first half, 6-4 down, and again, a sign of Mickey being ruthless. I think maybe it was after 20 minutes he brought on Brian McGuigan and Brian Dooher. It was a sign that things weren't going well, and he made the changes early. But the headspace, the training when I went back after the league, I thought was of a really high standard. Fergal McCann had come in he had big shoes to follow in terms of Paddy Tally's training, which was superb, and Fergal's very similar to Paddy, really well organised, and the training, thankfully for the older boys in the squad, was all football. Was with the ball, skills, shooting, game scenarios. So, and it was at a really good intensity, and that's the way it carried on for the rest of the year. A really enjoyable training that you look forward to it. So even though we struggled maybe to overcome down, it was close for 40 or 50 minutes. I think the vibe beforehand was pretty good, to be honest.
Well, just before I pass it on to you here, Ciaran, a minute, he's being a little bit modest here now. He comes on, and from the moment Peter comes on, Tyrone outscore down 1-5 to a point. They win 113-16. He scores 2. He sets up 2 more points, and he provides what we would call now the assist.
You're making him blush, Michael.
I know. I'm very impressed with myself. I'm impressed with myself. And an assist for a goal from Martin Penrose. So, yeah, like things are moving along. And then Cavan, of course, which is it's a war. It's a draw, and it's a war.
Yeah, that was a real battle the first day. All right, the standout matchup that day, I suppose, was Sean Kavanagh and Nicholas Walsh in the middle of the park, because they went at it.
I think battle might be the most appropriate term there, Peter. Is it?
Yeah, well, Sean came off in foul form anyway, and it was felt Nicholas had a job to do and did it. So it gave Sean and it gave the other Tyrone boys a kick up the arse, maybe for the replay, that we're going to have to match their intensity. We're going to have to match Cavan's physicality, and we managed to do that. We hit them for goals early on. I remember Philly Jordan coming up the pitch and scoring a great goal, and that got us going. We didn't look back, but that was, we easily, Cavan could have had us wiped in the semi-final that year, without a doubt.
No mention of a personal milestone being passed there, Peter, no?
Go on ahead.
Highest scoring Ulster forward of all time, achieved during the course of that match.
Well, I didn't realise that, to be honest, and that's not something that you're going around. For us at that stage, it was staying in the championship was the most important. So no, I put one on the plate for Philly Jordan. That's all I remember from that.
and delivered 1-7 of a 319 total. So you talked about trying to match Cavan's intensity. Cavan weren't able to repeat the intensity themselves of the first day, clearly.
Yeah, probably. And again, they would have felt that they had a lot of chances the first day that they missed. So I've no doubt they were going into the replay thinking that they could have played better. But also, I think the first day it took a free kick. Mickey Ling kicked one over for Cavan to get a draw, but it was a dubious free kick, to say the least. And Tyrone players were going off the pitch irate with the referee. And I recall Mickey giving out, why were we irate about, with the referee? It should be yourselves. Take a look at yourselves.
So again, coming back to that thing of let's not make excuses.
Yeah. That's right. Very much so. And it was absolutely right. When we look back on the game, we were well below par. And funny, the year we won it, in 2003, we had 2 replays along the way and won both replays. But Tyrone had a really good record under Mickey with replays. So we were going in well revved up, but knowing and believing that you'd see the real Tyrone, or you'd see a better side of us, and certainly that's the way it panned out.
Because it does feel like it steps on the stairs a small bit, like that draw and Cavan game. I remember speaking to Sean Kavanagh about it in the years afterwards, and I know we've mentioned one Cavan player there, but just to make sure that in case there's any confusion, we're not necessarily implying that Cavan player either did all the damage or any of the damage. But I remember Sean saying, like, he was spat at that day. He came off afterwards. He was talking about bite marks on his arms and his legs. He had welts from being pinched. The verbals obviously were all there as well. Like, it was the sort of day, like, I think you just said it kind of there, Peter, like it was a wake-up call. Like, it was kind of, again, it's echoing back to Mickey's kind of question after the West game. Well, what are you going to do here? Are you going to fade away, or are you going to stand up to what's... Because this isn't the last time this is going to happen this year.
Yeah, and you have to bear in mind a lot of these lads, Michael, were in their early 20s. You know, Sean Kavanagh at that stage.
At this time, like, there's a lot of talk about Sean Kavanagh going to play in the AFL. Like, there's a Brisbane Lions rumour doing the rounds. So that must have been head-turning for him, and yet still he's putting in these performances.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was still... maybe not by his high standards, but he still had an important contribution to make that day, as he did virtually in every game that year. But he was one of, possibly one player that Cavan focused on. But as I said earlier, with this Tyrone team, you were foolish maybe to put all your eggs in one, or try and take Stevie out of it, and you were freeing up space for somebody else. So again, there was others that came into the breach and maybe stood up for Sean a wee bit better the second day round than they did the first day.
And this all tees up an Ulster final, and I guess this is the part that, Mick, to your point at the start about like the era we're in, the age we're in, like this Ulster final, as soon as we know the teams, this is going to Croker.
It encapsulates everything that's both new and epic and era defining about the period. Because first of all, the new Croke Park is, 3 years old, something like that. So it's had its novelty. The novelty value is kind of still there, but it's starting to bed in now as a place. It's a time when the Dubs are bringing great crowds. But now an Ulster final is there. Why? Because it's Armagh versus Tyrone. It's the 03 All-Ireland final repeated. It's a rivalry that has been fomenting and generating probably for 5 years at this stage, 6 years. You had a famous McKenna Cup game the previous year where there was an enormous crowd turned up at the start of the year. I mean, it was ridiculous stuff altogether. So we're now at a point where Armagh are league champions. They're actually on at the drawing game. It ends a draw, the Ulster final. At that point, they're 13 games unbeaten, Armagh, between 8 league and 5 championships. So they are supreme. They both have won All-Ireland each. And it's just a clash for the ages. Now, as often happens when these things,
this is the rumble in the jungle.
It is without having a big underdog, because it could have gone either which way. It's more the thrill of Manila to me, because you've got two serious heavyweights at the peak of their powers coming at each other, knowing that their games now are going to, maybe not entirely, but partly define their status in the moment, but also in time to come. So, I mean, to Peter's point again there, I mean, Stephen O'Neill has the most extraordinary season, really, when you look back over it. I mean, he kicks in this Ulster final that ends 2-8 to 14 points in front of over 60,000 people. He kicks 10 points. And it's compared at the time to Frank McGuigan. Did Frank McGuigan kick, was it 10 or 11 points Frank McGuigan kicked in the famous game in 84 against that? Was it an Ulster final?
He kicked 10 and scored 1 of his fists. So he finished with 11, actually.
That was it. So he's being, like, Stephen O'Neill is now being put in that bracket, the Frank McGuigan bracket. In time, Stephen O'Neill will get his own bracket, but at the time, it's Frank McGuigan. But Armagh score 1-1 in the last couple of minutes to salvage the game. Stevie McDonald gets a goal to Paul McGrain, points to draw, and it was a little bit of, was it a recurring theme at the time, Peter, that Tyrone, I'd say, good in replays, but not always good to lock down a game when it was there in your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of the few replays that was lost around that era. But back to even 02, when Tyrone and Armagh played in the championship, the year Armagh won it, it went to replay in the first round of Ulster. So it was no surprise the game was as tight as it was, and maybe for an Ulster final, as a player, some of us, we didn't say it at the time, we're disappointed maybe that it wasn't in Clonus, because there's something special about playing an Ulster final in Clonus and having the place jam-packed as well, because the atmosphere there is really special. But you're not too perturbed whenever the plan B is Croke Park, because you always look forward to getting playing in Croke Park, and such was the crowd. You're absolutely right. I don't know if it was that winter or 04 where there was something like 15 or 16,000 at that McKenna Cup final.
It might have been. Maybe it was. It was one of those 2 years anyway. It was a ridiculous crowd turnout.
It was 15,000. So my memories of that are similar to your own. For anybody who wants to go back on YouTube and watch a masterclass point scoring. Stevie O'Neill put on an exhibition that day, and he was being marked by Francie Bellew, who was in his prime back then too.
Yeah, that's not an easy day at the office.
No, absolutely not. But I don't care who would have been marking him that day. He was unmarkable. Such was the quality of his scores and the sharpness to his performance. But we outplayed Armagh without a doubt that day. Tyrone played really well. Couldn't finish them off. Armagh were hanging in, and they finished with a real strong kick to get a draw. So that was my memory of that. And the second day, maybe actually something similar in the replay, in that Tyrone played most of the football, and it was Armagh that came with the strong finish and pipped us at the end.
4 down with 10 minutes left, Armagh were, and they won by 2. And I remember speaking. I cannot remember what Armagh player it was, so I'm not gonna impugn any of them. But the week before, I remember
when I was going to say Corkman played a very pivotal role that day too.
He did, and we'll come to him in a minute now. But I remember speaking to an Armagh player the week before. It wasn't for anything in particular, but he said the replay, and I'm sure it must have been the same with Tyrone. It wasn't really about winning an Ulster at this point. It was about beating Tyrone. It was about just, it's a rivalry, like just what you want to be. That step ahead of your greatest rivals at the time. What were those games like, Peter? I mean, you would have played through the years. You played in all sorts of different, through all sorts of different rivalries that Tyrone would have had. Like, where does Armagh kind of sit?
And you would have been close enough with some of the Armagh guys, Peter, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, my memories of those games with Armagh, surely we would have perceived Armagh to be a very physical outfit, and that if you got caught up in their sort of game, they would eat you up. We were probably a bit smaller and more mobile, so it was our game plan was very much on trying to move the ball quick and keeping the game alive. But look, such was the quality of their players, and they had experience in their team too, that they could withstand periods of Tyrone dominance, which they did really well, and yet still come back and finish strong. Oisin McConville in a couple of those games would be quiet for 30, 40 minutes, and in the space of 5 minutes he'll hit you for 1-2. Stevie McDonald was the exact same, and they had a scoring threat from all over the pitch too, from half-backs, from midfield. Paul McGrain was capable of coming forward and getting scores, so they were a quality side. There was no doubt about that, but they were still enjoyable games to play in because they were so intense. And whereas in years ago when Tyrone and Armagh played, there was a lot of late tackles and hits and all the rest. By and large, the games, whilst there was no love lost, they were playing a good spread.
But there was a serious tension in the game, and you've alluded to the refereeing. So I think it's worth getting into that. Mick, you can probably give us a timeline of how it influenced the outcome.
I'll give my timeline, and Peter can give his timeline, and we'll see how they match. We'll see how they map. So the game is incredibly tense. My father actually went to this game, a Tipperary hurling man with no interest in football whatsoever. But he went with a friend of his, and he said, and I won't name the Armagh player, but he said he saw an Armagh player at one stage bury his fist into Brian Dooher. It just disappeared into his midriff, and it came back out again at one stage in the game. And Dooher kind of went down on one knee and kind of shook himself like a dog taking, after rain, just shaking the rain off himself, and jogged on. And my father, who was reared now in Mid-Tipperary on Hell's Kitchen, John Doyle, all that stuff, looked and said he'd never seen anything like the ferocity of this match. So that's my own personal bar of how tough this game was, right? But in terms of the sendings off and the chaos that happens, by this stage, Peter, you're on the bench. You're kind of managing a rib injury, I think, at this point. He comes in with 20 minutes to go. First thing that happens, Ciaran, there's a hot ball. And Peter very diligently puts himself near the hot ball because he knows when the Armagh man comes down, he'll need bottling up. And the Armagh man who comes down with it is Kieran McGeeney. At this stage, by the way, and I don't mean to be ageist about it, Peter, but yourself and McGeeney were the longest serving inter-county players still operating in championship football at this point since 1989. So you bottle McGeeney up. McGeeney falls down.
Fairly, you might add.
Fairly bottles him up. Yeah, he's making sure that's clarified.
Listen to my words. Listen to my words. Nothing happens. Everyone falls down. A huge melee ensues. Now, I can only see the forest of legs, and it's one of those pulling and dragging sort of affairs.
It's the cartoon, right? with the dust.
It is,
and limbs coming out of various sides.
And there's not even a Batman thwack or a bow or pow or anything like that going. It's just a mess. And it's kind of more or less finishes with Ciaran McKeever pulling Peter out by the jersey, and literally pulling the jersey off of him. So Michael Collins, the referee from Cork, the officials have been standing back. Now you'd be kind of going, they're very intelligently standing back.
They'd want to be very brave, I'd imagine, to step into the middle of that one.
I mean, the Tipperary man sitting in the stand felt he was very brave just being in the ground. So I don't know how the referee felt in the middle of all this. So the boys have pulled out. Michael Collins pulls Peter Canavan and Ciaran McKeever over, shows red cards. Off they go. I just while I think of it, Peter, I'm watching it back again. I mean, you jog off. There's no kind of, from either of you, and not that I'm expecting histrionics or anything, but you're literally just after coming on the field.
Like you haven't done anything.
You haven't done a thing, but you just jog off as though, yeah, that just happened. Like, what's going through was it just a surreal thing, or what did it feel like jogging off in that moment?
Well, what was the point in saying or doing anything? It's one of frustration. It's one of embarrassment. The film that was out in the time, I think, was named Gone in 60 Seconds or something like that there. So you were getting a queer touch about that. And also, I was getting a slagging before the game because I'd rib trouble. I had to wear that black vest, and I says, I can't wear that. And whoever physio, whatever, says, sure, nobody's going to see it anyway, so it doesn't make any difference. And the whole country see it. But anyway, it was just real disappointment that you weren't able to make an impact, and that, yeah, you felt the ref got it wrong, absolutely. But you were just hoping, going off, these boys better win this game, or I know where the blame's going to lie. And to make matters worse, Stevie O'Neill got red carded in the wrong shortly after it, and likewise he didn't hang about what was the point of arguing at that stage either, and he was coming off probably thinking the same, but from being in a really good position. And again, I would say for us, what was the point of mixing it with Armagh? We had tried that different years. Running into Francie Bellew, running into the McNultys is like running into a brick wall. There was no point, or Paul McGrain and these boys. So it wasn't in their interest to do it. But that's the way it panned out. The other thing, Pat McEnany would have refereed a lot of the Tyrone Armagh games back then. And if it had been him, I think he would have dealt with it differently. Maybe.
Do you think that's because of his familiarity with the players, or just a different style?
I would say that, and the game, as I said, it was intense. Absolutely, the exchanges were physical and so on. And when referees are accustomed to that, they can deal with it easier. As you say, they know the players. If someone needs to settle down a bit, Pat would have told you, in his own way. But absolutely, Michael Collins was a good referee and all the rest, but he got a couple of big calls wrong that day.
It just got away from him. I think the intensity of the whole thing got away. As you say, Stephen O'Neill, not even so much that he was wrongly sent off. He didn't even receive. He got a yellow. Hadn't even received a yellow card previously. So the referee showed him a yellow and sent him off. So when it came to appeals and all the rest of it, so Tyrone, by the way, are down to 13 men in this game, and it's Peter Canavan and Stephen O'Neill gone off. So that's an enormous impact. Ciaran McKeever is sent off. So when it comes to appeals and so on, Peter appeals his red card. It's rescinded. Mickey Hart, by the way, is incensed after the game, making the point that Peter hasn't raised a hand to anybody. He said it's simply not acceptable, the red card. As we say, Stephen O'Neill's red card is immediately rescinded.
Love the free episodes of Over the Bar? Then take your passion further with the Cordia Club membership. For €5 a month, you'll unlock bonus series and member-only shows. Hear the podcast first and ad-free, and get behind-the-scenes access through detailed notes, a newsletter, and Q&As. It's the ultimate GEA history experience, curated by Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara just for you. Upgrade your listening, support the show. Join today at overthebar.club.
just want to detour for a second, Ciaran, because this is a kind of a
this is the beginning of the DRA era.
It is, and it's a very formative time for a very brand new set of disciplinary structures, right? So, and it all gets mangled up really. So, subsequent to the Ulster final, which, as I said, Armagh have won 13 points to 11. By the way, that's their 5th Ulster in 7 years. Like, Ulster hasn't seen this kind of dominance since Down in the 1960s. So, it's a major, major victory. But in the week afterwards, the 2 red cards are sorted out, but Ryan McMenamin is called back for a knee drop on John McEntee. Paul McGrain is called back in from Armagh, accused of striking, because Brian Mallon had been mistakenly booked instead of Paul McGrain. And Kieran McKeever is called back in to be punished in a harsher manner for whatever went on in the melee. So Tyrone have Monaghan next in the qualifiers. The appeals
That's just what you want at that stage, is to be playing another neighbour after that.
Nice and calm. Just a loosener to get back between the ditches. The appeal, the McMenamin appeal, goes all the way to the morning. It fails. Mickey Hart again is very, very angry at how it's been conducted. They have to go to the Central Disciplinary Committee. This is this new group, and he said it just wasn't. He said there wasn't much professionalism, he says, shown at the meeting. At this point, there's talk about Armagh Tyrone being targeted. Why are they being pulled out like this? Tyrone win quite comfortably against Monaghan.
I'm sensing a nice little siege mentality.
Peter, you must have been raging at this stage, were you?
Well, you can laugh at it now, but the fact that there were so many suspensions and all the rest at the time, but the only Tyrone man that ended up doing time was Ricey. And it reminded me back in the 90s, there was Tyrone and Cavan had an unmerciful row in O'Neill Park in Dungannon, where you had 30 players involved, all taking lumps out of other. There was a lot of us called up for investigation to Croke Park, but the only 2 that got suspended was Paul Donnelly and John Lynch. And poor old Ricey would have a similar name maybe to those boys, so he done the time. But it was easy, put it like that, to motivate Tyrone after that game. Any other year, you play Armagh twice and you lose in a game that you felt that you should have won, then you would have been at a very low ebb. So from a team point of view, everybody was back at training with a renewed sense of purpose. And you're right, Ciaran, look, everybody's again is here. This is what is thought of Tyrone. What are you going to do about it? And I would say Mickey, behind it all, was probably rubbing his hands, knowing that he had a group of angry men coming to training on Tuesday night. And
poor old Monaghan just wandered into the headlights.
Oh, just into the propellers.
Yeah, well, look, again, at that stage, we had played Cavan twice. We had 2 really good games against Armagh. I don't know how long Monaghan were waiting, but Tyrone, and it was back in Croke Park again, the scene of the crime, and it was time to put things right. So I'm not too sure, it's 9 or 10 points maybe was in that game.
2-14 to 1-7, double scores.
Yeah, and again, carrying on his good form, Stevie O'Neill bagged a couple of goals again and was very much leading from the front. So yeah, and that just got us back on track again, definitely.
I think 2 significant things happened as well here after the Monaghan game. First of all, Tyrone draw Dublin in the All-Ireland quarter-final. So, having kind of battled through the foothills, you're starting now to see the summit, and you're starting to meet the teams that, you want to be meeting. When you're starting to meet the Dubs, you're close. You're close to something. The other thing that happened that was significant, I think, was that the McMenamin suspension was rescinded. So he was gone. He would have been gone for a month. But because the rickety nature of these new disciplinary
listeners are going to wonder if any suspensions were fulfilled in this year.
Like there was probably fair case that some of them should have stood, but very few of them did. So the basis for this one, and strap yourself in for this now. So the CDC that I mentioned, the Central Disciplinary Committee, had been working off an old proposal from Central Council that punishments could be upgraded if video evidence showed a case for an upgrading. But the DRA, the Disputes Resolution Authority, which was put in to basically end the whole era of GA players and teams going to the courts, the civil courts, to block suspensions and overturn them. The DRA overturned that decision on the basis that a disciplinary task force headed by Pádraig Duffy, who was later Director General in 2003, that set up the CDC and the DRA and all these things, had not activated this option where you could upgrade a card using video evidence and override the referee's report. So the referee's report remained sacrosanct. Now, there was a debate at the time that I'm sure all the Tyrone players were poring over, whether Peter Canavan's appeal should also have been treated in the same way. But the fundamental difference was that Ryan McMenamin had been hauled over the coals by the GA itself. He had been summoned, whereas Peter Canavan's appeal had been brought by Tyrone and Peter Canavan. So there was no problem with that. But if the GA summoned you, they were the ones who had to make the case, and they hadn't made sufficient case. So Ricey is back. They're playing the Dubs, and the draw is a draw again. 78,500 people, 114 to 114. Peter, this is the day of Owen Mulligan's classic goal.
That was the biggest thing that came out of that game, because that reignited Owen Mulligan. Up to that point, by his standards, he was having a quiet enough year. And you can see, again, if anybody cares to look back on the replay, the semi-final, the final, the influence that Mulligan had in all those games was immense. But there's no doubt about it that the turning point was in the second half against Dublin. And again, what's remarkable about that, he was very nearly being taken off before it, because I think I came on for the last 10 or 15 minutes and Mickey had said, what do you reckon here? You're going to go inside. I think it might have been Ryan Mallon and Muggsy were the two men that was playing inside. And at that stage, I hadn't played much with Ryan Mallon inside. I had with Mulligan, and it was a case of, look, I would link up better with him. Maybe it might be better if you kept. But I've often told Mulligan, all I had to say, take that Mulligan, buy off. He's playing crap. That would have been the end of him.
You were back in the scenario in school where you picked him.
See that wonder goal that he got where he beat 4 or 5 men stuck in the back of the net? I'm taking the credit for it. But again, you'll never see the like of that again in a big game. What a goal. And he never looked back after that. So the replay against Dublin was probably his finest game in a Tyrone jersey without doubt. And it was definitely sparked by that goal in the drawing game.
You would have taught him in school. He was going through a period in 05 where he had gone to Hart and said, I want to leave the panel. Hart said, stick in. Your chance will come when when you least expect it, your chance will come to light this thing up. How did he need to be managed, Peter? How do people get the best out of Owen Mulligan in that era?
Yeah, well, I didn't think it was too difficult in that. I suppose he gave the perception that he enjoyed the crack and he was a bit of a party animal and all, enjoyed a good time. But there's nobody behind the scenes trained as hard in terms of his own work, football-wise, hitting free kicks and practicing on the pitch on his own. Likewise in the gym, there's no one worked harder in the gym than Mulligan. You only had to look at his physique to know that. So again, he was throwing out the perception that he didn't really care and all the rest. He was a serious competitor, in the same league as the Gormleys and the Jordans. So, but I suppose he needed football, and at times he needed reassurance that he was as good as he was too, like anybody. But boy, did he prove it in style against Dublin.
There's a great quote from Mickey in the aftermath of the game where he says, those who castigate people who dye their hair and other things like that, they do well to step back and appreciate the individual.
Absolutely. And a lot of people would have said that Mickey and his management style was very formulaic and regimental and all the rest. Then if he wouldn't have been playing boys like Muggsy. He allowed creativity and boys to do their own thing at times as well. And if that wasn't the case, as you quite rightly say, the likes of Mulligan wouldn't have been on the pitch. So with characters like that, you have to give them a certain leeway. And thankfully that was the case with Muggsy.
We all remember in these years that Dublin brought a sense of box office to games when you played them. So, you got these huge crowds. everybody talking about when are they going to make their breakthrough, all this kind of thing. You've gotten over this Dublin team that's so spoken about. And what lies ahead? But another meeting with your ears and dearest.
Just before you go on to the semi-final, Ciaran, the quarter-final replay against Dublin, by far it was the best atmosphere that I ever witnessed in Croke Park, bar none, as a player or spectator. Because what happened that day, of course, there was a serious hunger in Dublin with this team to get to win an All-Ireland. So their support base was fanatical at that stage with the hill and all the rest. But because the first game was so good and Muggsy's goal, you had a packed Croke Park to begin with for the replay. And unlike a packed Croke Park on All-Ireland final day where you have so many neutrals, the majority of these people were either from Tyrone or Dublin. And Tyrone got off to a really good lead, maybe 7 or 8 points. And then Dublin began a comeback. And with every point, they got it down to 6, they got it down to 5, they got it down to... And they were on a roll. And with every point, the stadium was lifting. I'd never witnessed anything like it before. And they had back to maybe 2 points. And the comeback was on. They were about to overtake Tyrone. And Muggsy stuck one in the back of the net, walked up to the hill, was chest out. And that was it, deflated. That was the game over. And but again, I'm not too sure if you can watch the highlights of that, but by far the atmosphere of that game will never leave me. It was something special to be there to witness it. And as you say, then our reward for taking on and beating a really good Dublin team was a game with the old enemy again in the semi-final.
And it was only a week later. It was 8 days, Saturday and then the following Sunday. So this is kind of, again, were you feeling tired at any stage in this? Or how did they talk about it?
Are you actually training at this point, or are you just kind of topping up between games?
Yeah, well, after that Dublin game, there definitely wouldn't have been much done that week. Again, it was mentality was the most important thing, and probably easy enough to get the team prepared for it, because even though it was a brilliant victory over Dublin, we were chasing after what happened against Armagh the last time. Nobody needed to be brought back down to earth after the Dublin team. If it had been anybody else we were playing, it would have been different. So the focus, the sights were very much set on Armagh immediately after the Dublin game. And I don't think there was tiredness in the squad, to be honest, because there was plenty of breaks between all the other games. There was only a week then, but as it turned out, it looked as if we were probably tired because of the 3 games we played against Armagh that year. We played the poorest. Now, when I say poorest, that was by our own standards. It was still a really good game. Anybody that's seen it and was at it still rave about that game for the physicality, the hits that went in. I recall Francie Bellew winning the ball, coming out at full steam from his full back line, and Sean Kavanagh meeting him, running in at full steam with a shoulder charge.
That's Godzilla versus Kong stuff there.
It was serious hit, but a measure of the commitment of the two men, and that set the tone for the rest of the game. And it was a role reversal in that Armagh played the better football for 60 minutes of that game. By far the better team on that day, but it was Tyrone that finished stronger and finished with a burst and just about got over the line.
Just about got over the line is right. Like to me, I was at that game. I don't know, were you at it, Ciaran? I was certainly there.
I wasn't there that day, no.
You weren't there? God have mercy on you. Like, it was, to me, going back, and I must actually watch it again just to see is it still the case, because in my head for years, pound for pound, it's the best football game I've ever seen. Like, it kind of just captured an era again. I mean, we talked a little bit about this sense of era defining about 05. I mean, this was a game, there was mass defence in it. There was lightning counter-attack though, and the speed and the athleticism and the nerve and the accuracy of the play, and just knowing what was freighted on the game, what was on this match. I mean, even the Armagh
all the drama around it as well. Like, there was like looking for Pat McEnany as referee and getting Paddy Russell instead. You know what I mean? There was
another ghost from the past.
Ryan McMenamin has told a story about having beer spat on him by an Armagh fan while out with a friend. You know what I mean? The friend was Ronan Clark.
Like these things came up. Yeah.
That's not true, Ciaran, because Ricey didn't have any friends in those days.
Peter, there is like you can now talk about this as a trilogy that defines that year, but like there's so many connections between the two groups. Like Father Gerard McAleer, who's involved in Tyrone, has been the parish priest in Mullaban. Like his first mass, Kieran McGeaney and Benny Tierney are his altar boys. You know what I mean? There's the connections where Cormac McAnallen was teaching in Armagh, lives on the border in English. You know, there's all these little things that if you're from outside, you don't understand how much they interconnect. You would have been friendly with an awful lot of the Armagh players through college and schools and all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course you were. You knew them inside out. And I think Collie Holmes and Oisin McConville were very close as well. But there was, again, it didn't matter. It was a case of getting to an All-Ireland final, and friendships were easily cast aside and put away. And as you mentioned, we were the team maybe with the chip on the shoulder after what happened at the Ulster final. For the hullabaloo over the referee then, you're right, it was felt there should have been an Ulster referee, and it ended up being a referee that we felt had no love for Tyrone, ended up doing it. So again, we used that to our advantage, but we didn't have that much time to prepare for it, which maybe wasn't a bad thing either. But again, just my memories are the physicality of it. And unlike a lot of games today where when you win a ball, things are more measured and there's keeping possession and more sideways passing, it was up and down the pitch. As soon as you won the ball, there was more kicking. And at that time, Armagh in particular, with Clark, Stevie McDonald inside, the long diagonal ball was a game plan they used a lot. So there was no hanging about. It was played at a serious pace, and hence why it was such a good game to watch.
And it comes down to 1 point.
Can you talk us through that, Peter? So just before you do, just to set the scene for people. So Armagh are 112 to 110 ahead with about 6 odd minutes to go plus injury time. And Tyrone, as we mentioned earlier, Tyrone had now been talking about we need to close games out better. You know, we need to get it. So they get level. And in the very last breath of the game, Kieran McKeever fouled Stephen O'Neill for what's going to be the deciding kick. And I will hand pass the ball to you from here, Peter.
The point to equalise just before was every bit as important to Tyrone. We were 2 behind, and it was our cornerback, Shane Sweeney, that came up the pitch, a man that wouldn't score too many points for Tyrone, but that got us level, and that was a crucial score in itself. But the free kick at the end, and it's well documented at this stage, but it was Owen Mulligan was our free taker that day, and I've no doubt he would have kicked it over the bar. I've said that before. But I was down on one knee getting a breather, and it was, I think it was Sean Kavanagh and Brian McGuigan both came over at different times and said, you better get up, you're hitting that free. And if they hadn't have said that, then I definitely wouldn't have been hitting it. So I had to dander up to see what was going on. And if Mulligan had said, I'm hitting it, I would have let him, absolutely no doubt. But he came out shrug on the shoulders as well. What do you want? What do you think? And without telling me what to do, he left me with no other choice but to kick it myself. And that is why I ended up kicking it. So, and thankfully it went over the bar. And it'd be easy to say Muggsy didn't want to kick it. I would love to say that, but he was prepared to kick it. But I felt as the experienced player at that time, it was my job to do that.
And that's Mickey's view of it is, yes, you had players on the field. You had any number of forwards that probably could have kicked that free.
Well,
but
you know what?
His point is you were the only one that would possibly have borne the burden best if it had been missed.
Possibly. I don't know, but it was either that or Sean Kavanagh and Brian McGuigan had just no confidence in Mulligan, which is what I like to believe. But it was interesting that, again, you know, people would have said how regimental and dogmatic Mickey was as manager. You didn't look over, the players weren't looking over to the manager to see who it was. Again, and we didn't even think about it. It was left up to the players at the time to make the right decision. And, I take it Mickey was happy enough with the way it panned out.
How important was it in the course of your career? And you've kicked a lot of points like this at different levels of the game, whether it's club or intercounty, to win games, to draw games. How important, how difficult a kick was it for you?
It definitely wasn't a difficult kick. It was a difficult kick because of the circumstances. And when you're in the middle of the game, and I've said this before, you're not as tensed up as you would be sitting in a crowd watching the game, where it would have been nerve-wracking, and it was nerve-wracking for supporters. When you're in the middle of the game, adrenaline's flowing, you get on with it, and you don't have the time to think. It's an important kick, of course you do, but you're just thinking of doing your job and keeping your head down, getting a good contact, because the hill, kicking into the hill, is not straightforward. And I've missed a few where if you attempt to curl it, it can get caught in the breeze and it can pull to the left. So in that instance, it was from experience, right? I'm not curling it, I'm going to try and hit it straight. And that was why I did that. And if you, Mulligan style, maybe he would have curled a lot of them, he would have put it out more. But again, thankfully, it was head down, worry about your technique, and it sailed over all right.
Well, the quote on the Armagh bus afterwards from Eamon Mackle, their logistics guy, was, they are mad us.
Yeah, that was fair enough. It was the complete opposite of what happened to us in the previous two games, yeah.
And you're back in an All-Ireland final then, and Mick, living below there in Dingle, will probably be best able to describe how the Kingdom come into All-Ireland finals.
Oh, well, they're very relaxed about the whole thing, and really, whether they win or lose, they don't really dwell on them for much afterwards. No, they don't. Everything is freighted on this thing. It's absolutely the be all and end all. No, it has been. I wasn't living down here in 05, but certainly, like, the mood around Kerry at that stage, they had come through 05 relatively comfortably. Like, they had absolutely hammered Cork in the All-Ireland semi-final. The team was pretty much what it was. It was guys coming back. I think Darragh Kinnaird actually came back for that final from injury and so on. So they were in a good place. The thing that always intrigued me about that was that it was something we didn't mention at the top, was at the end of 2004, Kerry were All-Ireland champions. For people who don't recall,
I was kind of hoping you wouldn't bring that up, but
yeah, well, we'll do another episode on the 2004 All-Ireland football final. I'll do a proper autopsy on what happened in Mayo, but that's another very bloody day's work. But the conversations around the end of the year in 04 was, particularly from Kerry, was that we've saved football. We've come in, we have won an All-Ireland title with style and with a modern flourish. I can't imagine that would have played very well in Tyrone, Peter.
Absolutely, and again, in terms of motivation, it wasn't a difficult final, because the term puke football, originated from Kerry. So, and the fact that they had won it, and that we didn't get maybe the credit out of winning an All-Ireland in 03, it was obvious, it was there. We weren't making it up. So motivation certainly wasn't the problem. And as I said, with 3 weeks to get ready, so there was plenty of time for players to get rid of whatever knocks and bruises from the Armagh game, and then to get focused. And my memories of that couple of weeks was good weather and going to training knowing that you're going to play in an All-Ireland final. And what a better, you couldn't get a better time for players to be in their element, preparing for an All-Ireland final. The treatment table normally before games is busy.
I was about to say, it's less
for
busy
those 2
in the lead
weeks.
up to a final, I take it.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say. The physios couldn't believe the turnaround and fortunes. Everybody champing at the bit. And thrown at that stage, there was serious competition for places, and it was a tough team to pick. So there was good options there, and everybody knew that they needed to be at themselves. So I recall 2 weeks of brilliant training, really sharp, players focused, looking forward to it. And again, with a chip on the shoulder and trying to prove a point that we were worthy All-Ireland champions in 03, and that we beat Kerry once and didn't get maybe the credit for it, and it was time to do it again. And knowing that we were going to have to play well to beat them, but it was very much after getting over Armagh and the local rivalry, it was a game players really were looking forward to. And I think you made a point earlier, Michael, about the quality of the football in that final. It was a brilliant game to be involved in, and when you look back on it now, it's easy watched.
Love GEA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
What's this story about you almost missing the bus because of Adrian Logan?
I don't know if it was Adrian Logan. Did Adrian Logan say it was his fault?
It was someone from UTV anyway.
I think there was an interview. We had met in Ballygolly, and the interview was just a quick word before we left the Ballygolly roundabout. There was a lot of supporters out and all the rest, wishing us on our way. And again, it's a throwback. Maybe you wouldn't, managers now mightn't be that fussed on big send-offs or anything like that there. Mickey was happy for people to be there and supporters to send us off. So there was a serious crowd at the roundabout, and the bus driver, it might have been John Hurl, I'm not too sure, but out of no doubt some of the boys, when somebody would have shouted down to the bus, as everybody in, you had plenty of boys saying, yeah, everybody in, going ahead, knowing rightly that I was back there. So the bus had been on, and I suppose it's just to see me run after the bus, maybe give a few of them a bit of a kick. But I was a bit late, but I got on it. I was there.
The big thing coming into that final was obviously Tyrone wanted to get the most they could get out of you in that final, however much the body was able to give. So if people don't recall, you start the game, you go off at halftime, and you come back on again with 15 minutes to go. Now, the one thing I was always curious about was when did that idea come up, and what was your reaction to? I presume it was Mickey brought it up. What was your reaction to the idea?
Well, unlike the 2003 final where I had no choice and I knew it was going to happen, I didn't know it was going to happen, and I wasn't too enamoured with the idea, being honest. Mickey, just going off the pitch, he says, look, we're going to rest you here and bring you on the last 10 or 15. And I said, yes, Mickey, I think I'm doing all right here. I'm grand. I'm not too tired or whatever. He says, look, we need a big 10 or 15 minutes. And again, he playing on a reaction from the crowd if things didn't go our way or if Kerry came back. So didn't like it, to be honest, but understood. And he was a manager, and if that's what he felt best. And look, at this stage, I had no reason to doubt him. He had proven before in terms of timing of substitutions, and he had said often enough that this was going to be a team game and a pound game, and so you have to understand it, the reasoning behind it. And there was other players there deserving. It's not that I didn't trust the boys going on. So it was his call, and again, I was just anxious to get back in again and hoping that we would still be very much in the game. And as it turned out, the boys, again, they played really well from start to finish. There was very little lulls in their performance, which meant that I was fresh coming on for the last 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, like it's an amazingly good game. It's an amazingly good final. And actually, funny enough, when you say about, not being sure whether you should come off, I mean, you had just scored a goal just before half time. I mean, you were probably buzzing coming off, having scored the goal and everything.
Yeah, I'd got a goal and was getting a bit of ball and felt that I was having a good influence on the game. But again, it wasn't a game you're coming off at half time, you're coming off completely knackered and said, here, I'm glad of a bit of a break. Such was it maybe it's because Kerry had a fair bit of possession that day. Dara O'Shea was superb in the middle. Tomas had a clinking game, after a slow start. Ryan Mann asked him a lot of questions. The Gooch, every time he got the ball, looked sharp, dangerous, kicked some great scores. Darragh Coneta had a goal. So Kerry were flying. Kerry actually played really well. It was just that, like I said before, everybody chipped in. Ryan Mann, Muggsy, Kevin Hughes Sean Kavanagh again in the middle was superb. So we had different players chipping in. Stevie, of course, Anda, McGinley. You had players coming, chipping in. So they couldn't focus on one or two players because the scores was coming from all over the place.
The goal itself, Peter, talk us through that.
I think it came from a turnover, maybe where we won the ball deep in our own half, and the strange thing, because Kerry had the ball and were in possession, some of their defenders had obviously gone forward, but the man that was marking Mulligan at the back for the high ball, Philly Jordan, came on a raid, and he wouldn't have kicked too many. Philly liked to carry the ball and come in, but whether he seen the mismatch or Muggsy calling for it anyway, there was space inside, they had no sweeper, and it was Mulligan and Paul Galvin, trying to contest it. Galvin tried to break the ball. Muggsy was able to get it, and he hadn't much choice but to give it to me, because I was screaming for it for about 10 yards before I got it, knowing what was going to happen. And from there on in, it was hit and hope.
I know from experience over the years that you always say you got to put it on the deck and you got to put it in the corner, and you did both.
Well, you wouldn't believe what helped me to put it on the corner. And I've said it before. The year before, we had an all-star trip to Hong Kong, and Dermot Murphy was the goalkeeper on one of the teams out there. And as you know from a lot of the all-star matches, they're high-scoring affairs, and you have a lot of chances to score goals. But I remember Murphy on that occasion, the amount of saves, and I remember blasting a few at him as well, and he was able to react, able to save. He put on a wonder show. So I remember thinking that there's not too many places you can put the ball against this man. So that helped, and that I felt it was going to have to be on the deck, and there was no point in blasting it. So just my angle of the run and all the rest, there was an option. Most goalkeepers were expecting you to blast it across, cut across your body, go to the opposite side, and he may have been anticipating that as well, and hence I decided just to keep it low and to keep it to the left-hand side. Days it happens, days it doesn't. Thankfully that day it managed to find its way in.
There's a replay angle of that goal from behind the goal where you can actually see everything you've just described. So you can see the ball coming in with Paul Galvin and Muggsy having their back to camera, and you screaming for the ball. So to see all of that happen in split seconds.
It's all fine margins, as you know, Ciaran. But even after Mulligan gave me the ball, if you watch him, his job wasn't done. He tried to keep Galvin away from getting. He was falling back into him, trying to use his body to stop Galvin getting a block in. So again, fine margins. If he hadn't done that, maybe Galvin would have got over and made the block. So it's, as I say, it was meant to be.
You've mentioned that you knew you were coming back on. Obviously, the spectators didn't know that. So the initial reaction to your substitution, that could have worked either way in terms of dismaying or concerning Tyrone support in the ground and lifting Kerry support.
That's right. And again, a bit like the 0-3 final, because, a lot of people, you said it was a masterstroke by Mickey doing what he did. But if Tyrone had lost the 0-3 final, he would have got a right touch about playing somebody that was injured, not fit to run, when you had someone like Stephen O'Neill sitting on the bench. Gamble, and it came off. And likewise with this, if if we hadn't won, if Kerry had got off to a good start in the second half, took the lead and held on, then, Mickey would have a bit of explaining to do maybe as well. So it's gambles. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But thankfully for me, it certainly, I was fresh. I wanted the ball in those last 10 or 15 minutes. So, but as I said, the rest of the boys, the work was done. They were flying, playing really good football, and they withstood a serious onslaught. Kerry gave it everything to try and get back in. Brilliant goal by Tomas O'Shea, but luckily we held on.
You get into the dressing room, the door is shut for all the right reasons this time. How did you break it to the lads that you were stepping away?
Well, look, I had it in my head that it was a frustrating year for me, and that I spent a lot of it on the treatment table. Loved every minute of the training, but felt you were a bit part player, and it was to me in the back of my head probably relief, just one relief to have won a second All-Ireland. I don't think it was going to get any better than that, and looking back, I probably should have waited, probably should have let Mickey know, but I would have known that if I had let Mickey know, and he would have talked me out of it and would have kept me involved. But as I said, you're either in it or you're not, and I felt that I had played my part and I had done my bit, and you're able to walk away on your own terms and with your head held very high, knowing that you'd left. And where else would you want to do that than win an All-Ireland in Croke Park?
Love GAA history? Then you love going deeper with Over the Bar's Cordia Club membership. For just €5 a month, you'll get exclusive member-only episodes and series, early ad-free access to the main podcast, plus detailed show notes, a newsletter, and the chance to have your questions answered. Join Michael Foley and Ciaran O'Hara as they uncover the stories, the legends, and the questions that shaped our games. Don't just listen, be part of the club. Join now at overthebar.club.
I'd like to put this in context. I said, in my opinion, it's the greatest All-Ireland football title that was ever won to date. You win it in 10 games, that's a record. Tyrone beat the Munster, Leinster, Ulster, National League champions, and the defending All-Ireland champions, averaging 18 points a game, when that was a significant sum at that time. Only 3 All-Ireland finals in the previous 20 years had produced more scores than the 2005 final. So that is a great final. Like the year, I suppose, we get to All-Stars and things like that, it becomes a celebration of what Tyrone have achieved. Like Tyrone win 8 All-Stars that winter. It's the highest number of All-Stars for any individual county since Kerry won 9 in 1981. So you got Ryan McMenamin, Conor Gormley, Philip Jordan, Sean Kavanagh, Brian Dooher, Peter Canavan, Owen Mulligan, and Stephen O'Neill. So it's, it's not so much the 10-game thing isn't necessarily Ciaran, I don't think, the thing, but it's just the sheer achievement, the caliber of teams they've beaten, obviously the hurdles they've overcome. We haven't mentioned Cormac McAnallen in a while. It's worth mentioning. I think I'm right in saying, Peter, that Mickey would often, he would have said it to me even, like, you don't make Cormac's memory a crusade. You try and be the best you can be. What would Cormac have done in this scenario? He's not mentioned really during the year, as you said, until the night before the All-Ireland, when Philip Jordan at the end of a team meeting says, let's do it for Cormac.
Again, a very difficult position to be in for management and knowing how to approach it. And I've said before, the Tyrone management at that time, they could have used it. And there was times in that year, we've gone through it in a bit of detail there, that things were at a low ebb. And if you needed an excuse or needed, that could have been used, or Cormac's name could have been brought up to get players focused or motivated. It was never used. But deep down, players knew what he said at that meeting back in 2004, prior to his death. And that was very evident after the game, as I said, in Brian's speech, and how players felt. So very well handled by management, and that if it had been, I've no doubt some players would have felt the weight of pressure on their shoulders, and it may have gone against them. but it was the feeling of satisfaction after winning that All Ireland. If the first one was about relief and just sheer emotion of winning your first All Ireland, the second one very much there was a satisfaction from knowing that you honoured a man that deserved to be honoured and that had done his bit for Tyrone, and also just proving to people that we were deserving All Ireland champions in 2003 maybe when we didn't get it. So that sense of satisfaction, internal satisfaction, as I said, can never be replaced.
There's a great quote from, I gather Ger Loughnane attended the Errigal social in 2005, and he said the second All Ireland is fulfilment.
That's right. That was a gala, black tie gala, and the only man that didn't come in a black tie was Ger Loughnane. Someone forgot to tell Ger it was a black tie affair. And his words were very much ring through. That's how it felt, and it helps when you win playing with quality football, and very much those games against Dublin and Armagh, Kerry, which there was a certain degree of physicality in the games. There was also ample, and when you look back on those years, back to Down and the Cavan game, some of the quality of the scores and the attack and play from the full back line out, as I said earlier, it's very easy to watch.
Peter, all I can say is thanks very much for joining us. It's one of the great All-Ireland journeys. Having known you for so long, for me personally, I'm glad that that's how yours came to a close as well, was with a victory of that nature. So thanks a million for being with us today and for giving us an extra insight into what was an outstanding campaign.
Pleasure. Cheers, Michael and Ciaran.
That's where we leave it, folks. Our sincere thanks to all of you for listening. As I usually end with a plea, do rate the podcast, do share the podcast. Do you know what I've heard since? If you leave comments in your player, that helps too. So do leave comments.